Hello, everybody. I'm Gina from OC Habitats, and I'm here with Kurt Lieber from Ocean Defenders Alliance.
Well, I just wanted to fill you guys in on, what Ocean Defenders does, and I'll start out by telling you a little bit about myself, and then we'll get into more nuances about what goes on with ODA. I grew up in Ohio, was living actually on the shores of Lake Erie in the 60s. And right 9 miles away from where my house was, the Cuyahoga River caught on fire. This was the river that ran through town. And it didn't catch on fire because it was an oil spill. It caught on fire because that's how we treated our waterways back then. And it burned for 3 days, and I was swimming in that stuff every day as part of my enjoyment of getting into Lake Erie. So at the same time, I was going into my living room at night and watching these great Jacques Cousteau documentaries on life all over the planet in the underwater world. And it was very disheartening to me to see all these animals dying in Lake Erie. They were swimming around with lesions on them and tumors, and they were gasping for air. It was horrible. So I knew then that I wanted to get out. I've always been a water person. I wanted to get out of Ohio as soon as I could. And I moved to California in '79 because I wanted to be near the ocean. And I immediately started diving in the kelp beds off of Laguna Beach, as well as other areas down south there. I was living in Huntington, but Laguna was a nice close ride by. So while I was diving there, I found out about some of the things that were going wrong with the oceans. And one of the things that was paramount was we lost 90% of the kelp forest due to a La Nina that came through in 1982. And one of the reasons that the kelp hadn't come back was because we had eliminated the otters from their territory. That shot you just saw there was all that remained of the otter population, which at one time numbered the hundreds of thousands. And that small group was seen in Central California along Big Sur. There were only 50 of them left. So they put a moratorium on killing them. And now the otters have kind of come back. They're doing pretty well along Central California and better up in Alaska and Canada. Then I started looking into food sources. What did they eat? And abalone were part of their diet. Well, that was with the otters gone, it was a boon to the so-called fishing industry. That's a small family farm that had collected all those abalones, and they were really easy to catch because they only move like 6 feet over almost most of their lifetime. So they're really easy to catch, and they did, and they caught them so proficiently that they were declared commercially extinct in, I believe it was the late 80s, might have been early 90s. So they put a moratorium on catching them, and in hopes of having that population come back. Well, another thing that happened with the kelp is that with the otters gone, the urchin population exploded, and the urchins eat. These are holdfasts, what are known as holdfasts that you're seeing there, and that's like the root system for the kelp plant. They grab onto the rocks. But the urchins come along and they nibble away at that holdfast to the point where the kelp can't hold on to anything, and they float away into the abyss. And without them being anchored, they can't grow, so they die. And in these kelp forests, you'll have upwards to 1,000 different species that thrive in that habitat. So with those guys gone, with kelp gone, you lose that habitat for them. One of the animals that are left that can eat urchins are the sheep's head, if they're big enough. Another one of the animals that can eat urchins are lobsters. If they're big enough, you have to let them get to be mature. And in 1999, I was diving off of Anacapa, and I came across this abandoned lobster trap, and there were lobsters in it, obviously. And I struggled to get them out of there, and some people came along and helped me get them out. And when we got to the back to the dive boat, it was the talk of the boat. Everybody was just in awe or aghast that somebody would set all those lobsters free. And so I thought, well, maybe there's something I can do about this. Maybe I can get together with my buddies on a weekend and do something about the abandoned traps that we were seeing. So I was volunteering with Sea Shepherd at the time and asked them to donate a boat to me, and they donated this boat. It was a 24-foot boat, single engine. We called it the Garibaldi, but really we should have called it the boat who wouldn't float, because it always wanted to go down with us. But we managed to keep it afloat for about 5 years, as I recall. And we went up and down the coast of Orange County looking for abandoned traps. And this is one of the reasons that I'm so adamant about removing those things. What you saw there was an abandoned traps line. The line goes to the surface, and when the trap becomes abandoned, that line is still hanging in the water. And the whales can come along and get entangled of them. And as you guys know, most likely, you see whales along our coast a lot. This one was seen in Laguna Beach at Divers Cove. This was in 25 feet of water. And this lady that filmed it was 19 years old at the time. This was her second dive. And this whale came out and made a circle, or came back and looked at her. And it changed her life. She was a committed underwater photographer now, and continues to do that. So that's one of the reasons that I like to get this stuff out of there, is I don't want to hear about whales getting entangled in this stuff. So we went throughout Laguna Beach and collected thousands and thousands of feet of that line. This is an entanglement that happened off of Newport Beach. I believe it was 2019. And you can see, even though it's a little line, it's cutting into the flesh of this humpback whale. And sometimes, it can cut off a fin, it can cut off a dorsal fin, or excuse me, a tail fluke. And it can get into the whale's mouth, and it inhibits their feeding. There's estimates that say roughly 80% of the humpback whales show signs of entanglement at one point in their life. So you can see that they're not all dying because of entanglements, but it has a drastic effect on their health. NOAA just started doing documentation on where these entanglements were happening, confirmed entanglements. And this was about 20 years ago that they started doing that. So it's expanded now to the point where they're doing a lot better documentation of it. And we're part of that, helping them understand where these happenings are going on. And in 2006 or 7, I think this was, we got a new boat donated, or another boat donated to us, called the Clearwater. This was an ex-Coast Guard rescue vessel for the Canadian Navy. And now we could go out to the islands with this thing. So our first major job was, we went to the Infidel, which was in 150 feet of water. This is on the far south side of Catalina Island. And there was a huge net that was still attached to this boat. This was a squid boat that they got greedy, and when they had their holds full of the squid, they thought, well, we're real close to Avalon, we can just grab another net full of squid and drag it over there. Well, a big wave came along when they got the net to the surface, and it rolled the boat over and it went down. So that boat was engulfed in their own net, and it was catching all kinds of animals. These nets are made out of nylon, going to last, scientists say, 650 years before they deteriorate. And hopefully your audience is following this enough that they know that there's hundreds of tons of this stuff put in the ocean every year. I believe it's 680 tons of it discarded in the oceans every year. So it's important to get that out. One of the interesting things that happened for ODA is the LA Times covered this story when we were removing that stuff. And it kind of changed the trajectory of ODA, because now people all over the world knew who ODA was. You get something in the LA Times and it goes all over the place. So moving on to 2014, Bob Barker, the game show host, found out what we were doing, and he made a significant donation that allowed us to go out and buy that boat, and we called it Mr. Barker's Legacy. And on our very first outing, when we were just testing the boat out and we weren't really planning on removing anything, the divers found 3 traps there. And one of the guys said, "Hey, Kurt, I think there's 30 lobsters in this trap." And sure enough, we pulled, I believe it was 42 lobsters out of that and set them free. One of the things we're doing to try to educate the public about what's going on is we go when lobster season starts and document where they're setting a lot of these traps. And unfortunately or fortunately, we have MPAs, marine protected areas. Over on the left side of the screen is a marine protected area. No fishing is allowed in there. This is Laguna Beach. On the right side, you can do all the fishing you want. So because the marine protected areas are so efficient at what they're doing, the animals are allowed to grow, the lobsters get bigger and there's more of them, but they move in and out of the park every day. And the lobster fishermen know that, and they set their traps right along the border, knowing that they stand a good chance of catching them. This is kind of hard to see, but every one of those purple dots represents one of those marker buoys, and that red line is the park boundary. So you can see they set them right along the boundary there, and a lot of them are really close together. This is us going underwater in that same spot, and with our scooters documenting what we saw down there. And sometimes these traps are set, I don't know, 10, 20 feet apart, really close together. So you can imagine a whale trying to swim through this has a good chance of becoming entangled in this stuff. And we want to let people know that, this is a concern, a cause for concern. That even though gray whales aren't on the endangered species list anymore, we still don't want to see them, suffering like they would if they got entangled in this. And we have humpbacks that have come through our waters as well, as you saw earlier, and they are endangered. So it's really a problem trying to keep those guys safe. When we find an abandoned trap, and this one was, we obviously set the animals free and then also disable the trap so no more animals can get caught in it. The Orange County Register covered the story of us documenting these traps. And again, I'm trying to educate the public. I'm not saying that we have to abandon this way of fishing, but these animals suffer. This is a humpback that had the tail flukes completely cut off by a trap line. I'm not saying it was a lobster trap line. It was never confirmed because, as you can see, it was no longer there. One of the other things we do is when the rains come, and I don't remember when it rained, but it does sometimes, and it washes a lot of the plastics that are in the roadways and in the waterways, the culverts and all that stuff, washes it down into the harbors. This is Huntington Harbor. And Huntington Harbor and the adjacent estuaries are home to a lot of migrating birds. This is part of the Pacific Flyway. And they're swimming amongst all this styrofoam and plastic, and sometimes they're eating it, but regardless of whether they're eating it, they're surrounded by this stuff. And we want to do what we can to prevent them from having to ingest this stuff and possibly get sick and die from it. So we go into areas where we can have access to, and a lot of organizations are doing beach cleanups. There's nothing new there, but what's unique about ODA is we can get into areas where you can't always get to by land, so we have boats that we can go into. This is Seal Beach National Wildlife Refuge, which is just north of Huntington Harbor. And this is an area that it's right before the river dumps it out into the ocean. And here you can see all this stuff lying in the shoreline there at the high tide mark. And we get, sometimes 20 people down there to clean this up. And what's nice about it, you can see, look at the difference you can make by just spending a couple hours cleaning that stuff up. Now, it doesn't do anything to get rid of the microplastics, that's the small stuff, but we do get rid of a lot of the big stuff. So that's kind of the gist of what ODA does in California, and we'll go from cold water here to a little warmer, Hawaii. I was diving in Hawaii for a long time, and I got invited to give a presentation to the law school there on Oahu, and they wanted to hear about what ODA was doing and just kind of a general information thing. But by the end of the talk, they decided that they wanted to try to start a chapter on Oahu. And of course, I'm all for it because I loved it. It was a magical place for me, diving with spinner dolphins and bottlenose dolphins. There's nothing like that in the world to feel a part of such a group of magnificent animals. So I'm going to let this go and
founder of Ocean Defenders Alliance.
This is a little
This is a short
PSA
video about how plastic fishing lines can create havoc for some of Hawaii's iconic marine mammals, turtles, corals, and fish. You probably love Hawaii's rich diversity of marine life as much as I do. 30% of the fish found here are endemic, meaning they can't be found anywhere else in the world. Others, like humpback whales, come here in the winter months to enjoy the warm waters, have their babies, and then mate before they migrate up to Alaska. Spinner dolphins can be seen here year-round and are a huge part of the dive tourism industry. Who doesn't want to swim with one of these wild dolphins? Turtles are another iconic animal of these islands, and they play a vital role in the Hawaiian culture and religion. Unfortunately, humans are having a dramatic effect on their well-being. Whales, dolphins, seals, and turtles are getting entangled in active and abandoned fishing gear. Some of this gear is put in the water by commercial fishermen, but some of it is also left behind by recreational fishermen. Just about anywhere you go on these islands, you will see fishermen casting their lines from shore, hoping to hook a big one. Sometimes that big one may be a dolphin, a manta ray, or a turtle. They don't intentionally hook these animals, but when they cast their lines, there's no telling who is underwater when the hook drops down. And when the hooks reach the bottom, they can become caught on a coral head or a rock. The fishermen then cut their lines and leave it behind because they have no way to retrieve it. Ocean Defenders is partnered with several dive shops on these islands. One of them, Island Divers Hawaii, lets us charter their boat once a month when we take our volunteer divers out to local dive spots and drop down to remove as much of this ghost gear as we can in one dive. The dives can last up to 1 hour, and we have pulled up hundreds of pounds of lead weights the fishermen use, as well as tens of thousands of feet of fishing lines. Here's a case where a dolphin had a fishing hook embedded in her flesh, right under her pectoral fin. It would be like you or I getting a hook stuck under our armpit. You can imagine how painful that would be every time you moved your arm. Dolphins obviously use their fins to swim, so they are severely impacted by these hooks. This diver eventually got the hook out because the dolphin was cooperating. Really amazing behavior. She has been seen by this diver many times since this incident and is doing just fine. Here we have a huge manta ray that had a hook and line wrapped around her massive wing, and if left unattended, would have eventually cut off half her fin, no doubt killing the animal. And as you can see, it only takes a few feet of this fishing line to cause a lot of damage. Turtles come in contact with these lines even more frequently because they swim close to shore where they feed on the algae and corals. Some of them have become so entangled that they can hardly move. This one had her flipper completely severed, and with the line wrapped around her neck, she slowly starved to death. Corals are also affected by these lines as they come in direct contact with them and leach the plastic's toxins into their bodies as it slowly degrades over time. How much time does it take for plastics to break down? Scientists say 450 years for a polypropylene line and 650 years for a nylon net. I hope you now are realizing how devastating this fishing gear can be on our native wildlife. It not only impacts their well-being, but it also affects the local economy. Tourists that see marine debris during their snorkeling or dive encounters are far less likely to visit again and will take their money elsewhere on their next vacation. So removing this debris has a direct impact on the health of the ecosystem, as well as on the tourism industry that allows the island economy to thrive. We're all thankful to all the volunteers and dive shops that have helped us remove the stoves gear, both on Oahu and on the Big Island of Hawaii. But it's not cheap chartering these dive boats and supplying all the gear necessary to facilitate the debris removal. We need volunteers. We also need the financial support of the community. I hope you will consider making a donation to ODA Hawaii. As you can see from this video, we have already accomplished a lot, but with your donation, we can get a whole lot more done.
Okay, so if you're still with me, I stopped diving in Hawaii back in the 90s because of the lack of fish. They have an aquarium fish trade there. There was no limits on the amount of fish they could take. And you look here, and where's all the fish? It used to be just smothered with reef fish, but because of that aquarium trade, they wiped the whole place out. Now they put a moratorium on it about not even a year ago. I'd have to say 8 months, and it's had a really nice effect. The fish are coming back really quickly. One of the other things that is unique about Hawaii is they have swirling currents that go around the island. And this net was swirling around the island, and it had over 100 frogfish stuck in it. And when this boat came along, it was one of the partners we have, Jack's Diving Locker. When they saw the net in the water, they asked the paying customers if it was okay with them if they forego their dive and remove the net, and they all agreed this was more important. So they paid to have that net removed, basically. I don't know if you guys are aware, but this spot on the Big Island, there's a spot called Camila Beach, now more referred to as Trash Beach. It's on the far south side of the island. It's very inaccessible, and the currents deliver a lot of the nets right to this beach, to the point where when they first found or discovered this massive nets there, it was 12 feet tall, 12 feet high, and roughly a half-mile long. And that beach was just smothered. There's another group that has taken this on to remove a lot of those nets. I believe they got 100 tons of nets off of there. But even while I was there, there was still plenty more to do. We released or removed, I believe it was 2,000 pounds of nets. And that was just 3 of us doing that over a couple hours. But in addition to the nets, you can see all the plastic that's washing up here. Really, really sad, because that stuff is breaking down over time. The animals, are walking through it, trying to feed on what they can find in there. And of course, they're eating the plastics as well. It's a real challenge to get to that spot. And it's unfortunate that, this stuff is ending up there. But this is part of the program we have with fishing gear. The fishermen just toss the stuff over the side rather than recycle it. We started working on Hanakahau Harbor, which is outside of Kona on the Big Island. And this harbor is not huge, but there's a lot of stuff in it. So we started getting with the local divers through Jack's Diving Locker and started removing what we could. We find a lot of tires in this particular spot. They use the tires as fenders, so they tie them to the dock, so the boats, when they go to hit the docks, they hit the tires rather than the hard wood and damage their boats. But all kinds of things end up over the side: hoses, batteries, computers. toilets, you name it, we find it. Anything that's on a boat eventually ends up in the water. And what's nice about this is we can get, you don't have to have high skills for what we're doing here. If you're a recreational diver and are comfortable in zero visibility water, you can go help us clean this up. The harbor master was nice enough to let us put this sign up. Well, they put the sign up in the harbor, and it's nice to get the acknowledgement that we're helping clean this up. We've now spent, I believe it's 8 dives cleaning that place, and we've removed over 25,000 pounds of stuff out of there. This is a unique system for removing plastics before it gets out to the water, to the ocean. This is Baltimore. There's a small river that runs right through downtown. This river drives that turbine, and you can see in the middle of that thing is a ramp. So the turbine drives the ramp. These over on the right hand side, the pontoons, I guess you call them, divert the plastics that are on the surface to that mechanism, and it drops it off into a bin on the back. So it gets roughly 90% of the plastics that were in the water end up in that bin. So it's a great way to cut down on the amount of plastics getting out. We're really big on education too. We like to get out to the schools and talk to the kids about what's going on and give them opportunities to help us out. And this is a school in Pasadena, the Clark Magnet School. Been working with them for probably 6-7 years. And they have a really good marine biology teacher there, Dominique. I can't remember her last name, but she gets these kids trained on how to operate underwater ROVs. And so we have been going down to the harbors just to get them acquainted with how it works in the water. And there's a video of what they saw up there. And then this is a sonar image of what they could see. And that was a lobster trap. That rectangular shape was a lobster trap that they found. So we finally got them out into the open ocean. We took them out to Anacapa Island. And we were just doing test run, hoping that we could get their skill set up, and they didn't get seasick. That's always a challenge with people that are out on boats a lot. But a couple of them got sick, but they stayed the course. And when they put that ROV in the water, they found a couple of traps. And this ROV had a clasper on it, like a claw. So they grabbed the line. That's how good these kids were with that thing. They couldn't pull the trap up because of the weight, but the divers went in and got it. And that's some of the rope that they had attached that claw to. We got, I believe it was 3 traps out of there that day. It was just a blast. And it's always nice to see young people get involved in these things. And it's one of the reasons I get out and talk to so many students when I get people as turned on to the ocean as I am. So that's that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kurt. We're so excited to be able to highlight another conservation nonprofit that is also working towards protection and restoration of our natural habitats. So we're so pleased we got to hear about Ocean Defenders Alliance. And I guess one more thing to talk about is if people want to get involved, how can we do that?
Well, we're up in Ventura, so it's a long way for people to go. But we have the big boat here, the Mr. Barker's Legacy. We have opportunities for people to help out on deck, so you don't have to have dive skills. You can just come out and we'll train you on how to help us secure the boat and help the divers out. And if you're inclined, to go diving with us, you have to have rescue diver certification. It's a couple levels above just a regular open water diver. But that's one way for you to help out. Another way is when you're out on the water or you're scuba diving around wherever you're at, if you see abandoned stuff in the water and you can't get it out yourself, you can report it to us. And we have an online form you can fill out that lets us know where the stuff is. And, the other way is, try to help us spread the message by getting out into schools and other civic groups. Give us the opportunity to tell people what's going on under the water. And of course, donations always help too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Well, unless there's anything else you wanted to bring up, I think that's good.
No.
Awesome.
That
All right.
about covered it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kurt.
right.
And goodbye, everybody.